Thanks, Stuart. Well, thanks everybody for coming along this morning. No pressure then being the main event. Thanks very much, Stuart. Well, I suppose I'm timetabled to talk to you for the next 90 minutes. The good news is I won't be talking for the next 90 minutes. The bad news is I expect you to do some work here today as well. So when we started talking about today's event, we were talking about innovation and some of the tools that we use at NDRC. And at the very core of what we do across all our programs is business model innovation. And that's genuinely where we believe most organizations will find their competitive advantage. I suppose we break it to a lot of the scientific people and the technology people that come to us that it's not so much about the technology, it's really all about your business model. And we found this tool being a really effective way of managing that. My focus in what I do on a day-to-day basis is very much around technology startups, but this tool applies across large and small organizations. It applies across for-profit and not-for-profit organizations. It can be used as an internal or external tool. It can be used within small groups, and it can be used across many departments across organizations. And what it really is a mindset in approaching how to innovate around your business model. It's a very simple tool. We're going to go old school today, so we'll be handing out some paper-based business model canvases. There are various online resources to do it, but actually I find the paper one far more effective. What I'd ask you to do is, depending on your background, I think if you come from a sales or marketing background, you probably will find this tool extremely intuitive. It's very customer-centric. If you come from a more technical background, you're going to need to change your mindset. It's not so much about features, it's really about the customer, looking at your business from the customer's perspective. And when you switch that mindset, it opens up a whole load of opportunities and helps you create a really innovative business model. So anyway, when I told my marketing people I was coming down here to talk, they said I had to do a bit of a plug about the NDRC before I started. So maybe for those of you who haven't heard about NDRC, I'll just do a brief introduction. So NDRC is a mouthful. It's National Digital Research Centre. It was set up about 5 years ago by a consortium of universities in Ireland to focus on commercialising the research coming out of the third level base. Obviously, we see a huge amount of money going into some fantastic research, but research is no use unless it's actually commercialised in the marketplace. And it was strongly felt that there was a gap just after that research in actually taking that research, applying business models to it, and spinning that out into the economy, either through a licensing model or through actually setting up startup businesses. Our focus has probably matured over those 5 years, and we're very much focused on creating sustainable ventures that actually go and take that research and commercialize it, rather than just creating a vehicle to license some research on. We're based up in the Digital Hub area in Dublin, and we're in one of the old Guinness storehouses. We have 3 floors that we operate out of. So as I was saying, on one side we have research funding, and on the other side we have venture investment, that'd be the traditional VCs, and in the middle there's a very clear gap between, well, I've done a load of research and now I need to create a business to do that, but there's actually a gap in funding and expertise that a lot of these researchers come across. So we're sitting right in the middle of that gap. So we have a number of instruments that we can use to work with third level researchers, to work with early stage technology startups, and our focus, obviously by the name, is very much in the digital sphere. And we have a collaborative model to do that. So again, over the 5 years, I suppose we eat our own dog food. It's been an iterative process. We've learned a huge amount over those 5 years, what does work, what doesn't work, and we've been applying those as we go along. So we have a number of programs that we use within NDRC. So there's 3 key programs. There's Inventorium, Catalyzer, and LaunchPad. And I think we have a couple of the LaunchPad participants here. So my focus is working with LaunchPad, which is a digital technology accelerator. The model is a very aggressive commercial validation process. So we take an early stage idea, we get them to relocate into the NDRC for a 12-week period. We aggressively focus on making sure that they're building something that the market actually wants, and that business model is scalable. So at the core of what we do in LaunchPad is the business model canvas. We workshop around value propositions, around the go-to-market strategy, around the financial models, and at the end of the 12 weeks, we put them in front of a room full of up to 200 investors to actually take them to the next stage, to take the follow-on investment. Over the last 2 years, we've invested in just under 60 companies. We're not a grant organisation in that we put a small amount of seed capital into each of these businesses, just €20,000, and for that we take an equity stake in the business. So we're actually very much an interested party. So we roll up our sleeves and get involved as an investor in the business. Through those 60 companies, we've raised almost 7 million in follow-on investment to those companies. And what's really clear now is the venture community are seeing us as validated deal flow for them. So they now come to us actively looking for qualified prospects to invest in. Inventorium is an Interreg project, so it's actually an EU-funded project between Wales and Ireland, and it's very much around the ideation phase. So that's where the open data challenge that Deirdre was talking about came out of. So it's really about really early stage, stimulating ideas, and then once we have those ideas, we have a number of vehicles that they can go on to if they want to commercialise them. And then at the next level, we have a program called Catalyzer, which is focused much more on what we call deep science, more IP driven, working very closely with the third level community and the research base, looking at something that may be protectable but needs an additional bit of fine tuning. But more important, it needs that understanding of how it's going to be applied in the marketplace and then building a business around that. So the model, as I said, is collaborative. So we've kind of three spokes to it. We have investors, we have researchers, and we have companies. So nearly every project that engages with us has representatives from each one of these communities. So if a researcher comes to the NDRC and says, look, I want to commercialise my research, we will actively seek a third-party private organisation, a company in the marketplace who already has an understanding of the industry, and we'll also bring in some investors. That may be us in the NDRC, in that we can co-fund the project, or it could be external investors. They relocate into the building, and then we have this collaborative process to nurture that along and bring that into an actual business. We've worked with a whole load of companies, from very early stage startups up to multinationals. Some of the areas we work in are very much in the learning space, in healthcare, in video technologies, in open data. We're starting to see more and more organizations coming through there. So we have a wide range of organizations, and we now have, I suppose, our tentacles into many, many organizations throughout Ireland. So what I want to do is maybe just talk to you more about my direct experience in LaunchPad. As I said, it's a very focused 12-week program which works on the commercial validation of ideas. The key thing is the business model canvas, so I will be talking you through that and letting you know how you do it. But I want to take a step back and just get you to understand our approach if you're starting a business. But I would like you to bear in mind that all of these principles can be applied to larger organizations, community organizations, or just simple departments. So an awful lot of people approach us with an idea, and it's a fairly straightforward path in building a startup, and it isn't rocket science. It's actually applying a discipline around this and doing this properly. I suppose an awful lot of those people who come to us with an idea, we have to tear them down a little. An idea is absolutely worth nothing, and that's all it is. There's hundreds of ideas every day. It's actually how do you take it to the next stage and take that idea and actually move it on to something. We very much see this as kind of a split right down the middle. There's theory on one side and practice on the other side, and we want to get you to the practice side as quickly as possible. So the idea and the size of the opportunity. You can sit at your desktop, you can Google it, you can get an idea whether this idea appears to be good, what size of the market opportunity it is, and it's just desk-based research. But it really doesn't move you forward that much. what we really want you to do is get out and talk to customers. So we have a phrase in the NDRC, it's called get out of the building. And it's stop building stuff, it's stop coding, stop perfecting your product. It's get out and talk to customers. And the minute you start talking to customers, everything changes. And that's the most important message I have for you today. You may think you have a great idea, you may think you have a wonderful solution to a problem, but the minute you start talking to customers, that's going to change. So you have to accept this notion of iteration, that based on that interaction and feedback with customers, your idea is going to change, but it's going to change for the better. So the first thing is actually finding those customers. So that's that whole customer discovery process. And again, that's not a theory thing. The only way to do that is to actually go out to the market and talk to a range of people and find out if they'd be interested in buying your notional product. And then the more important phase is that validation. So it's actually really drilling down into those early stage customers and making sure that you've got something that they want to buy and that you're fixing a very clear problem for them. So just to emphasize, this is one of the core tenets of what we do, not just in LaunchPad, but also in the NDRC, is most companies will fail from a lack of customers than from a failure of product development. Product development is actually quite straightforward nowadays. If you have a bit of money, you can build up a technical team and they can build pretty much anything. Particularly in the digital arena, it's become much cheaper to build stuff. With open source technologies, you can access stuff. The talent in the wider business community, in the development community, and within our research base is absolutely fantastic. But the reality is, even if they got this great idea, they built this great product, they've still got to go out and sell it, and that's where they struggle. So it's you got to really focus on the customers at every stage of your business idea. So we feel there's 3 stages of a startup: product solution fit, product launch fit, and product market fit. So just to put a simple question around, the first thing you want to ask is, do I have a problem worth solving? So that's really important, because there's nothing worse than going out and trying to sell a solution that nobody really cares about. It might be your itch and it might solve your problem, but is it really a big enough problem? Have I built something that people actually want? And there's only one way of doing that, and that's actually going out and talking to customers. And then finally, which is actually the easier bit, once you've worked out that there is a problem in the marketplace, it's a big enough problem, and that I've aligned my solution to that, is how do I scale that up? And that's very much where the business model canvas comes in. You can, in theory, before you actually build anything, you can optimize your business model for scalable growth. Another concept that I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about is that a startup, in our view, is just a learning organization. Is we don't know anything when we start. And every interaction we do with customers is a learning opportunity. And it's really important that you go into it with that mindset, that every engagement, every conversation you have with a customer, you're trying to learn something and you're trying to validate something. So this is where a lot of gut feel comes in. It's all about validated learning. It's very much qualitative. So, an awful lot of the stuff you'll be doing is conversational. It's actually going out, sitting down in front of the customers, talking about the problems that they have, talking about whether they might pay for a solution, talking about how important a solution to these particular problems are. So at this early stage, it is qualitative, so there's no science involved. It's getting out and talking to as many people and trying to build up as much information and a generalist picture of where we're going. I'd also like to introduce the notion of pivots. And anyone who's in digital technologies, this is almost a cliche now, the word pivot. But what it's about is when you interact with those customers, they're going to give you feedback and you're going to change your idea slightly. So you're going to pivot left or right, and that's a good thing. So be open to it. And what you're trying to do is, through those pivots, refine your product to something that has a big enough market opportunity. When we move then onto the product market fit, it's all about growth. So this is about scaling up your business. We only invest in businesses that we believe are scalable. So when we apply our business model canvas to it, we're only looking at routes that can actually make us go international. It's all about optimizations, so it tends to be about tweaks rather than dramatic pivots. Because what you have now is you have a product, you understand what the problem is, and now what you want to do is just optimize that for scale. This is where the science comes in, and it becomes much more quantitative. What we're seeing is, again, particularly in digital technologies, is that the maths geek is actually becoming the marketeer. Because when you want to scale up your business, you want to be tracking the important metrics in your business. So the things that are really you need to do to be scaling. And that is down to spreadsheets. So it's about how many people are downloading your app. When they do download it, how many people are doing the free trial. When they do the free trial, how many people are actually converting to the paid version. And when they do pay for it, how many of them actually stay with you. And then for those who stay with you, how many of them actually tell all their friends to go download the free trial. All of those are data points. All of those are points where you can optimize your business model, and you can make small optimizations at any one of those points that has a huge impact on your ability to scale that business up. So it's a learning organization, but most of all, it's this search for a scalable and repeatable business model. So what is a business model? There we go, just so happens to have one here. So this is the business model canvas. It's just a one-page overview of your business. You can see it's laid out like a jigsaw. I'll be going through this in more detail later on, but it's important to understand that every one of these boxes is interlinked. So if you make a change in any one of them, it has a ripple effect throughout it all. It's a fantastic brainstorming tool. When you're initially starting out with your idea. I use it as a management tool because at any given stage, I'm managing 15 startups. So for me to be able to jump into any one of those startups and see exactly where they're at, this is a fantastic way of doing it. You can have online versions, so I have an online tracking one. So all of our startups do their business model canvas online, and I can just go in and see exactly at what point they're at, what challenges they're having, and I can make my own contribution to it. It's also a great team building exercise, is that you can actually bring cross-functional teams together and actually get them all on the same page, get them understanding where they fit in and how they're contributing to the overall business model. So what's the difference between a business model and a business plan? When I first started my first business, I was going to the county enterprise board, I was going to investors and banks, and they were all insisting on my business plan. So I had to have my good 20, 30 page business plan with my SWOT analysis and everything. And it was purely an academic exercise. It was just to tick a box for them. The reality is that it's a document that they actually ask you to write, but they never read. They might have a quick look at the financials and the cash flows at the back, and they'll read the exec summary at the beginning. But it doesn't actually help you in building your business. So the business model, going backwards. The business model is a single diagram of your business. It's a living document. It's not something that you do once at the beginning of the exercise, and that's it. It's iterative. So every time you engage with customers, you're going to learn something, and that's going to have an impact on your business model. So it's going to be constantly changing. So to have a tool that's simple to manage is really important to do that. Another thing about the business model canvas is, I think, when we think of our business, an awful lot of us think about our product. And if you look at this canvas here, the solution, which is actually the service you provide, it's the product you manufacture, it's the website that you build, you can see just visually what a small percentage of the overall business model it is. So your product isn't actually the product. If you look at how successful businesses compete, they tend to compete on the types of customers they're going after. So that your customer segments are really important. How they actually reach those customers. So obviously the internet has opened up a huge channel to worldwide opportunities. So that's your path to customers and the channels. We've seen innovation around how people charge. So with cloud-based software now, you're seeing software as a service. So there's been disruption in rather than having to buy big licenses for technology, you're now paying it pay as you go. So companies are competing around how they charge. the cost structure has changed dramatically for an awful lot of businesses. Again, using the example of cloud, is that they can now scale up very, very cost effectively and disrupt businesses that made huge investment in infrastructure. So for some businesses, their biggest competitive advantage is how they actually, their cost structure is made up. So the important thing to see here is that your business model is actually the product. It's not, your product is not the product. And I think that's just one of those things that if you think about it for a while, it makes a whole load of sense. But once you convert to that thinking, it opens up a myriad of opportunities as to how you can compete in the marketplace. Because now what you're not saying is, oh, I need an additional feature to be competitive. I need to add this thing to my website. You're now saying, okay, well, if I went after different customers, I could be going after a completely new market. If I charge in a different way, that opens up different opportunities for me. So you now have a much broader way of competing in the marketplace, and more significantly, you have more options to increase your competitive advantage and make you successful in the market. So what I want to do is maybe if we pass out the business model canvases, I think, does everybody have them, or did you all get them? Great. I'm just going to talk through kind of how we use it. I'll talk through some of the boxes, and then ideally what I'd like to do, so maybe if anybody wants to think about volunteering, is that maybe we talk through a couple of your own business models, and I think we can just brainstorm between us. One of the principles that we have in the NDRC is, don't hide your idea. You need to go out and talk to people about it, because when you go out and talk to people, you gain feedback, and when you gain feedback, you'll incorporate that into your business model. From a technical point of view, even from an idea point of view, I guarantee you, if you have an idea, there's probably 10 or 20 people, certainly around the world, if not the country, that are thinking the exact same thing. So we don't believe in keeping everything quiet and then just doing this grand launch and we'll take over the world. You need to go out and talk to people, and that's customers, that's colleagues, potentially that's competitors as well, and understand how your idea could impact in the marketplace. So the first thing we use with the business model is, okay, how do you document your plan A? And my comment about the plan A is, it is just that. It won't be like, at 99.9% you will not hit on the perfect model with your first idea. So just accept that it's an iterative process, and this is your first cut at it. So brainstorm possible customers. I think it's important to start here, is understanding who might buy the potential solution to the problem. From a digital point of view, I think it's very interesting that you need to distinguish between customers and users, because what we do, we see an awful lot of free services out there that people wonder, how on earth are they making money? The reality is, somebody is being charged for that service. So if it's free to a user, someone else is paying for that. So focus on who will actually pay you for this. So in the case of a consumer app that the service is free, it's more than likely that the data being generated by that activity is being sold to somebody else. And when you're starting out, you need to understand who's going to pay you money, because it's no use having a whole load of people who will use your service because they think it's cool, but they won't pay you for it. So you really need, at an early stage, understand who could pay for this. Initially, split these very broad customer segments into smaller ones, because it's really important that you get out and talk to these people. So don't have these big, broad customer demographics. Drill it down into smaller, manageable ones that you can actually start ticking off and saying, well, I'm going to go out and start talking to these people. We actually go through a process where at the very early stage, we drill down to name your first 50 customers. Now go out and talk to them and actually start working your way down through that. So it's actually almost putting, if it's a consumer product, well, Gary's going to be my first customer. I'm going to go out and talk to Gary because he represents one of those small customer segments. Sketch multiple lean canvases. So you can come with an idea, you can go at it from a whole load of angles. You can have different customer segments, you can have different pricing models, you can be fixing a slightly different problem. So list them all down. and just do it quickly. So it's just bullet points, so it's not big paragraphs, it's just gut feel, well, this is what it is. And you can line them all down. And then the exercise is to try and eliminate those as we go through. And as you eliminate them, you will start to see 2 or 3 optimum business models that come up. So a couple of points on sketching that lean canvas. Do it in one sitting. So don't overthink this. It isn't complicated. I think it's too often we can make it complicated. We don't need to. It's okay to leave sections blank. So if you just can't answer it, just leave it blank and work in the other sections. And after a while, it'll just start to come together. Think in the present. So don't bring all the baggage. So don't sit down there and say, well, that wouldn't work because, last year we tried that and it didn't work. Just this is kind of blue sky stuff. So just be really open to a new way of thinking. And most importantly, use a customer-centric approach. So when we go through each of the boxes, it would be always from the customer's perspective, how they view this. So the problem is from the customer's perspective. What problem are you fixing for them? The value proposition is, well, why is it important to me as a customer? If I'm paying for this, why is it important to me? It's not a list of features and what the application can do. It's why, what's the emotional bond with me? Why would I want to use this? So if we look at the canvas, you'll see the problem and customer segments. So we usually start there. So it's list the top 1 to 3 problems. So don't end up with a canvas that has 10 or 15 problems because you've just diluted your problem too much. You really want to focus in on what the real problem is for the customer. It's important also to list the existing alternatives around that. So understand, well, it would be very unusual for you to come up with a solution to a problem that no one's had before. These problems have probably been there for quite a while. People are addressing them somehow. That could be it's a paper-based solution. It could be they're just ignoring it. But those are things that you need to address. So just understand, how are people addressing those problems at the moment? Identify the other user roles. So this is around customers and users. Just identify who interacts with that problem. And it's important to hone in on the possible early adopters. So try and identify those people who would really be engaged at an early stage. What we find about early adopters is that they are the people that are the most generous with their time in giving you feedback. So if you can engage with those people, they're only too happy to sit down and tell you what's wrong with your solution. But that's really important because you need to hear that. What they also do is when you actually address that and fine-tune it with them, they then become huge advocates for your solution, and they will actually go out and broadcast that to the community, and they have a leadership role within that community as well. So a couple of the challenges that we find when people first start using this is that say, oh no, like we couldn't go out with something that isn't perfect, and it would be wrong for our customers to be telling us what's wrong with this. It's really, really important that you do that. We have a phrase that, if you're not embarrassed by your first product, there's something wrong with your product. So the idea is get something out there early and then iterate based on that early adopter feedback. The market has changed in that the market is now huge. It's international, it's worldwide. So to be honest, you can bleep this bit out. If you piss off a few of those early adopters, it doesn't really matter because the market opportunity is so vast. But what you want to do is engage with them as soon as possible to get this feedback that you need. So around the unique value proposition, that's very much at the center of the canvas. It's all about a single, clear, compelling message that states why you are different and worth paying attention to. I crossed out buying because this is the reality, is that it comes back to this customers and users. That value proposition might be very strong for people who use your service for free, but they still place a value on it. There's a time value attached to that. So they still need to value your service for them to use it. So you need to understand what that is from their perspective. So if somebody said to you, well, why would I use your product? This is the line you give them back. And that line has been validated so that it resonates very strongly with them. And if it doesn't resonate with them, either they're not a potential customer of yours or you've built the wrong thing. So target early adopters, talk about it in terms of story, don't talk about it in terms of product features, and it's very much a high concept pitch. So it's not dissimilar to your elevator pitch where you have a minute just to talk to somebody about your product. You want to excite them. We bring in artists, we bring in actors, we bring in a wide range of creative people to actually help people communicate their value proposition. We focus very much on the customer journey. As customers use your product, what are they experiencing? You try and tap into the emotions behind it. So when you do that, it really resonates with the customer. On the solution, I wouldn't worry about this too much, and I'll talk about that now in a minute. Outline a number of possible solutions for the problem. What you want to do is mirror the top 3 problems that you have. So there's a concept called the minimum viable product. So that's what's the least amount of stuff you need to build to start testing out your concept in the marketplace. In the web industry, that doesn't necessarily mean that you actually have to even build a product. It could be a wireframe, it could be a visual that you can actually sit down in front of a customer, show them and say, this is what I was thinking, what do you think of that? So what it's trying to do is not do things cheaply, but it's just to manage your scarce resources. So when you start up, you don't want to spend a whole load of money building an all singing, all dancing solution, only to put that in front of a customer and for them to say, I don't like that bit, don't like that bit, and don't like that bit. And then you find it doesn't work at all once you strip those out. So what you want to do is build up your product in iterations based on that customer feedback. So we would do things like smoke tests, which is, okay, here's my value proposition. I'm going to launch a web page. I'm going to put my value proposition up there, say, this is what I do. I won't have built anything other than just put up this holding page, run a Google AdWords campaign, put $50 or $100 into that, and see if I can drive traffic to that and get people to register for my product. By doing that, what you've actually done is proven or disproven that there's even a demand for your value proposition. And, I think that just makes so much more sense than spending $20,000, $30,000 building something and then going and finding that nobody wants it. So there's a whole load of tricks that you can do to actually prove that people want to buy your product and to start that learning process, start that engagement with those customers, start communicating with them. So if you capture email addresses from an exercise like that, you can then go back to them with surveys, you can go back to them and ask them could they do an interview over the phone, and you can actually dig down into, well, why did you actually come to this? Why did you want to buy this? What is it about our proposition that you were really attracted to? On the channels, so this is really about how we get to those customers. So we've identified potentially who those customers are. Now we want to start thinking about how do we get to them. There's a whole range of ways of doing that, but you want to start building and testing that path from day one. And that example of the smoke test is a really powerful example of testing that. Well, if we can reach people through the web doing something like this, we can start understanding the financials of what it's going to cost us to acquire these customers. And you want to be doing that from a very, very, very early stage, because what you want to find out is this business scalable? And it has implications for, those paths to customers have implications for your financials, your cost structure, and also your revenue structure. On the revenue streams and cost structure, so running along the bottom of your canvas, you'll see just the financial side of it. Obviously, you want those to balance out. So, you're charging based on the way you've structured your cost structure. But I just wanted to talk to you about pricing a little bit. So people assume that, pricing doesn't come into the equation until you've actually built the product and you're actually outselling the product. So a lot of what I'm talking about is not sales, it's about customer development. So it's actually going out and talking to those customers at that early stage. So not actually selling them anything, it's getting them to talk to you and you learning from them. But it's a real mistake to ignore pricing till the stage where we've got something built and now we're launching. You want to be testing your pricing early because it has a massive implication on your business. First of all, to understand that people will pay for it, but more importantly, how much they will pay for it. And pricing becomes a strategic part of your product. So when you break this down, it makes sense. Pricing is part of your product. How you price it defines your product. Can it be seen as a commodity? Is it a premium product? It determines who your customers are. So if you charge a huge value for that, that obviously defines you at a particular customer segment. Getting paid is the ultimate form of validation. So if a customer is willing to take their credit card out, sign up to your service and pay you $30 a month, that is the ultimate validation. So the sooner you can get to that point, the better, because you will find a lot of tire kickers on this path that you're going down and say, yeah, great product, love it. And then finally you build it and then you say, will you pay for it? No. So you want to get to that very, very early on and find out that they will pay. And there's a variety of tricks that you can do that. But more and more often we are seeing people signing up and starting to pay for services before those services are even built. Those early adopters want to be in on those trends, they want to contribute to it, and they're happy to give their credit card details and actually should sign up. And avoid derivative currencies. People will say time, passion, attention, all of those stuff. You'll have an awful lot of people who will spend a lot of time talking to you about your ideas and your products. They'll be very passionate about what they do, but when it actually comes to the crunch of paying for it, they won't do it. So again, you need to weed those people out by pushing them on pricing and seeing if they will actually pay for it. So metrics, and this is where we were talking about the quantitative side of the whole process. It's understanding the key numbers that tell you how your business is doing. This is something that has become more and more sophisticated, but like for any business, they should understand what's the most important thing that we need to do to stay in business. And then you should have the discipline to track that constantly. Nowadays, it's far easier to do that. And you need to go through that exercise of identifying what those areas are that you need to track. In the online world, here's the main ones, and we call them pirate metrics. So if you actually just look down, it goes R. So first of all, acquisition. So how do the users find you? You want to be tracking that. Activation, do they have a great first experience? The retention, more importantly, after they find you and they've used your service, do they actually come back? Around the revenue, how do you actually make money? And then the referral, do users tell others? That's really where you want to get to, because that's your cheapest way of scaling your business, is when people start talking about your product. And online offers a huge amount of opportunities to actually nurture that and encourage that and build it into your product, and build that network effect, build that virality into your product from day one so that it has that hooks. So the unfair advantage on the business model, this is the one that everybody really, really struggles with. So traditionally, unfair advantage, we all think of a patent. We've got some intellectual property here that we can actually defend. This is probably more a personal view than anything else, but more and more so in the digital space now, I just don't believe that IP or patents are of any real value to you. The reality is, for a startup business, you're too small to defend them. So a bigger company would be able to throw all sorts of resources at it, fighting you. You will just go under after a while. In the technical space, there's so many workarounds anyway that whether you could actually get some real patent protection is questionable. So this is why we believe the business model is so important, that we think that most defensibility will come from innovation around your business model. So think of it in those areas that can't be easily copied or bought. So if you start going through each of those blocks on the business model and think of it in those terms, okay, what can I do here, or what do I have here that would be hard to copy or to buy in? Sometimes that could be customers, so it could be a customer relationship that you have that you've built up over years that would be really hard for somebody else just to step in and do that. It could be some technical know-how that you've created a team that has a blend of technical know-how that isn't just simply taken from a book; it's from experience, and that's very hard to just simply buy in. So there's a few areas that you can build up that unfair advantage, but I will say it is one of the hardest areas to populate on the canvas, and I wouldn't spend too much time on it because it's not overly important. So once you've done that, I think what you have to accept is now we've populated this canvas, but all it is now is a list of assumptions. So what you want to do is work out, how do I go test those assumptions? How do I stress test the validity of the assumptions that I've made? And you want to start that process by focusing on the riskiest parts of your plan. So I just want to talk about risk for a moment, because there's really three parts of risk that are going to affect your business. So there's the product risk, customer and market risk. So first of all, the product risk is just about getting the product right. So this is about making sure that your solution is very much aligned with the problem that you've identified in the marketplace. If there's any misalignment there, if there's any drift, it's only going to cause confusion, and it's going to be very hard to scale that up. Around the customer risk is building that path to customers. If you can't do that effectively, it has a huge implication on your business model. So we've seen an awful lot of good ideas whose business model is to scale up to a lot of users, but the cost of customer acquisition is so high, it cripples the business. So they've said, oh well, we're going to charge $9.99 a month, and that'll be fine, because that's how we'll get a whole load of users. We'll do a classic software as a service model. It'll be brilliant. But actually acquiring the customers for that is costing them $90. It just doesn't stack up. The lifetime value of their customer will never pay for their customer acquisition. So it's just optimizing that path to customers and understanding the implications of that path for your business model. And then the market risk is just building a viable business. So that's the challenge we all face. There's a whole load of market factors that will impact on our business model that will cause risk for us. So here are the three areas. So obviously you've got the problems, the path to customers, and then around your financials is your real market risk. So then you need to test that plan. So you've now said, well, here are the risky parts. I understand those. What am I going to actually do to go out and test those? So what I want to introduce here is the concept of build, measure, learn. So this is about building a small amount. Focus on your minimum viable product. So what's the least amount of stuff I need to do to actually have something that I can show to a customer? Show it to that customer, demonstrate it, get them to interact with it, be it using it or just communicating with you. Measure that interaction. So understand what they're telling you. Learn from that, and then it's a loop. So you're back into build again. So it goes from that idea to actually maybe coding something around it. And out of that customer interaction, you're going to start generating data that's going to inform your learning, that's going to feed you back. So it is this iterative approach. So every interaction you have is going to keep going around in this virtual loop all the time. So when we apply that to the actual business model canvas, so we're looking at the product risk. So we really start off with understanding the problem, define the solution. It's just the 4 steps. Validate qualitatively, so that's in your value proposition. So go out and talk to customers, and just from a qualitative point of view, just make sure that what you're saying around the problem solution makes sense to them, but then go to the next step and start to verify quantitatively. So as you're building out your product, focus on those metrics that you can actually track, that generate quantitative data that backs up your assumptions and validates those assumptions. The same is happening on the customer risk. You're going to understand the customer segments that you're going to. Go talk to the early adopters. Again, by talking to those early adopters, you're going to understand what you think are the best ways of reaching them. So then when you have identified that, what do you need to do to actually track that from a quantitative side? And then the market risk, it's understanding the alternatives that they have, because the reality is you're going to need to be displacing an alternative, so you need to know what you're displacing. Then come down to your revenue streams, understand what you're going to be charging for that, and make sure that stacks up from a financial model point of view. Talk to those early adopters and those potential customers. Make sure that those price points that you're going after make sense to them, and then move to that point where again you can track from a quantitative point of view that those assumptions stack up. So that's it. I'm going to charge $9.99 for my product. Okay, what am I going to do to actually really prove that? So how am I going to get to a point where that customer is going to open up their wallet and give me a tenner for my service, and then start tracking that. And then this is a loop that constantly goes around, and you're optimizing as you go along. So the first stage is all about understanding the problem. So how do your customers rank your top 3 problems? Because the first cut at your business model canvas, it's your viewpoint, it's your assumptions about what the top 3 problems are. Go out, talk to those early customers, and make sure that those top 3 problems are their top 3 problems. Is this a viable customer segment? This tends to be about the addressable market. So is this a big enough market? So we all start with fixing our own itch. We now need to go out and make sure there's enough people out there who have the same itch as us. And how do they solve these problems today? You need to be a significant step ahead of how they're solving the problem today to displace it, or you need to be disruptive enough that they want to adopt your solution as opposed to the way they're addressing that problem at the moment. And then it's about defining the solution. So what's the minimum feature set needed for the launch? What is that minimum viable product? Does that match up with the problem space? How do you identify that early adopter? And then will the customers pay for that solution? So you're addressing all those key areas of risk in your business. In the interest of sharing, the business model canvas is almost an open source project. This isn't something that the NDRC came up with. This is something that has been iterated over a number of years. It's been iterated from traditional businesses into the digital and technology side. So some of the key thought leaders around this are a guy called Ash Moira, Eric Rees, Steve Blank in Stanford, and Alex Osterwalder. So these are all the hashtags. I believe in these with the guys in Dublinked, so please follow these on Twitter. There's a huge amount of information about how to use this. This was a very high level introduction to the whole business model. Hopefully what we'll do now is we'll actually kind of go through a few of your business model ideas and you can see how it works. But I would suggest, particularly if you're in the digital space, Ash Moira has a book called Running Lean, which is a step-by-step guide to how you use and how you iterate from, as he says, from plan A to a plan that works. Very, very straightforward. I hope I've got across the key to concept is that we're now introducing more and more science to how you build a business. It's not all about gut feel. It's actually, there's a process, there's a framework that you can apply. What we're trying to do is de-risk business propositions, and we feel the most appropriate way of de-risking any business idea is to focus on customers from day one. Your innovation will more than likely lie in your business model than it will in your actual solution. So I think you can brainstorm, you can innovate around that without having to go to a huge expense. Just one final plug. LaunchPad is recruiting at the moment. So we invest in 15 startups 2 times a year. Our next program starts in September. The closing date for applications is 6th of July. If you're successful at that, you'll be asked in to do a pitch. We will see about just over 100 ideas that will come in and pitch to us, and from those we'll take 15 of the best ideas and we'll create them into investable businesses that have a scalable business model. So if you are interested, please come talk to me. As regards the NDRC, we have an open door policy when it comes to ideas of any stage. So if you want to come in and talk to us about it, we'll only be too delighted to. If anybody wants to come in and just whiteboard up their business model canvas, I'm only too happy to do that with you as well.